The fist slammed into the vending machine with enough force to crack the plastic panel. Blood dripped from knuckles onto the hospital floor, fat, dark drops that spread across white tile like spilled ink. The man attached to that fist didn't seem to notice. He was too busy laughing, too caught up in his own performance, throwing insults at the small woman in scrubs who'd asked him, politely, professionally, to please stop damaging hospital property. "What are you going to do about it, sweetheart?" Derek Ramsey's voice carried down the corridor of Silver Pine Medical Center, bouncing off walls plastered with hand sanitizer reminders and visiting hour notices. "Call security? Get me banned?" He flexed his good hand, the one that wasn't bleeding. "You know who I am?" The nurse didn't answer. She stood 5 feet back, clipboard tucked under one arm, expression so neutral it could have been carved from stone. That stillness, it should have been a warning. Derek was too stupid to read it. "I'm talking to you." He stepped closer, close enough that most people would have stepped back. "You deaf or just dumb?" What Derek Ramsey didn't know, what he couldn't have known, because Mara Reeves never talked about her past, was that the woman he was mocking had spent 6 years in places where silence meant survival and hesitation meant death. That the calmness in her eyes wasn't weakness. It was control so deeply ingrained it had become reflex. The insult hung in the air, and Mara's expression didn't change at all. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, stick around until the end, because what happens next? You won't see it coming. Mara Reeves had been working the emergency wing at Silver Pine Medical Center for 14 months, and in that time she'd developed a reputation among staff as someone you didn't worry about. Not because she was forgettable, though she tried to be, but because she handled things. Drunk patients who got handsy, family members who screamed about wait times. The kid last month who'd pulled a knife in triage because he thought they were calling the cops. Mara had talked him down in under 3 minutes, voice low and steady, hands visible, no sudden moves. Security arrived to find the kid sitting on the floor crying, and Mara crouched next to him, speaking too quietly for anyone else to hear. Afterward, when her supervisor asked what she'd said, Mara had just shrugged. "Told him I understood." That was the thing about Mara. She didn't do drama, didn't do spectacle. Showed up on time, worked her shifts, went home to a 1-bedroom apartment where the only personal items were a coffee maker and a single photo she kept face down in a drawer. People assumed she was shy, or sad, or just one of those nurses who burned out young and stayed because the paycheck was steady. Nobody knew what she'd been before Silver Pine. Nobody asked, which was exactly how she wanted it. Derek Ramsey, on the other hand, wanted everyone to know exactly who he was. He'd walked into the ER just after 9 on a Thursday night, hand wrapped in a gym towel that was soaked through with blood, and the first thing he'd done was announce his name to the intake nurse like it should mean something. When she didn't react, he'd said it again, louder. "Derek Ramsey. I fight at Ironclad Gym. You know, the place on 5th? The intake nurse, a woman named Patty who'd worked ER for 23 years and had seen everything twice, had barely looked up. "Name and date of birth, please." Derek's jaw tightened. "I just told you my name." Date of birth. He'd given it, sullen now, like a kid being scolded. Patty typed it in, printed his bracelet, told him to take a seat. Derek had looked at the waiting room, 3 other people, none of them bleeding, and said, "How long's the wait?" "Hard to say." "I'm bleeding." "So I see." "This is an emergency room." Patty had smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sure is." That was when Derek decided he didn't like Silver Pine Medical Center, or Patty, or the system in general. He sat down hard in one of the plastic chairs, muttered something about incompetence, and spent the next 15 minutes on his phone, texting someone about how hospitals were a scam and he should have just superglued it shut. When his name was finally called, it was Mara who came to get him. She'd stepped into the waiting room, glanced at her tablet, and said, "Derek Ramsey?" He'd looked up, seen a woman in navy scrubs, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup, no jewelry except a basic watch. She was small, maybe 5'4", maybe less, and she looked young, though it was hard to tell under the fluorescent lights. Derek had stood, rolling his shoulders like he was about to step into a ring, and followed her back. They walked through a set of double doors into the treatment area, a maze of curtain bays and rolling carts and the steady beep of monitors. Mara had led him to Bay 7, gestured to the exam table. "Have a seat. I'll take a look at that hand." Derek had sat, but he'd made sure to take up space doing it, legs spread wide, shoulders back. Took long enough. Mara pulled on a pair of gloves. "Busy night." "Didn't look that busy." "It is." He watched her unwrap the towel, slow and careful, and when she saw the gash across his knuckles, a deep split that would definitely need stitches, her expression didn't change. No wince, no sympathy, no concern. Just a quick assessment, the kind of look a mechanic gives a busted engine. Clinical, detached. Derek didn't like that either. "So what happened?" Mara asked. She was cleaning the wound now, dabbing at dried blood with gauze. "Training. Caught it on a bag hook. Must have been a sharp hook." "It was." She didn't push, just kept working, rinsing, inspecting. Derek shifted on the table, the paper crinkling under him. "You gonna stitch it or what?" "Doctor'll do that. I'm just prepping." "How long?" "Depends." "On what?" "On how many people are ahead of you." Derek made a noise in the back of his throat, something between a laugh and a scoff. "You know, where I train, we don't wait around for permission to get things done." Mara glanced up. Her eyes were gray, pale, almost colorless in the overhead light. "Good for you." "I'm serious. You want something? You take it. That's how the world works." "Is it?" It wasn't a question. Derek frowned. "You don't think so?" Mara set down the gauze and reached for a bottle of saline. "I think people who talk about taking things usually haven't had much taken from them." The words landed soft, almost conversational, but there was something under them, something Derek couldn't quite name. He leaned back, studying her. "You saying I don't know what I'm talking about? I'm saying you're bleeding on my table and complaining about wait times." She flushed the wound and Derek hissed through his teeth. Mara didn't apologize. "So maybe save the philosophy." For a second, Derek just stared. Then he laughed, sharp, surprised. "You got an attitude." "I've got work to do." "What's your name?" "Mara." "Mara what?" "Reeves." He repeated it, testing the sound. "Mara Reeves." "You always this friendly?" She wrapped his hand in clean gauze, taped it down. "Only when people make it easy." Derek grinned. It was the kind of grin he used in the gym, the one that said he'd already decided how this was going to go. "I like you." Mara didn't respond. She pulled off her gloves, tossed them in the bin, made a note on her tablet. "Doctor'll be in soon." "How soon?" "Soon." And then she was gone, slipping through the curtain without another word. Derek sat there for a second, still grinning, then pulled out his phone. Sent a text to his buddy Leon. "Just met the most uptight nurse in the world, LOL." Leon's reply came fast. "Hot?" Derek thought about it. Mara wasn't hot in the obvious way, not the kind of girl who'd show up in his DMs or hang around after fights. But there was something about her, something in the way she'd looked at him, like he wasn't worth the effort of a reaction. He typed back, "IDK. Cold as hell, though." The doctor showed up 20 minutes later. A tired-looking guy in his 50s who stitched Derek's hand without much conversation and sent him home with a prescription for antibiotics and instructions to keep it dry. Derek barely listened. He was already thinking about his next fight, his next training session, his next post. The hand would heal. Everything always healed. He left the hospital just before midnight, walked out through the automatic doors into a parking lot that smelled like rain and exhaust. Somewhere behind him, back in the ER, Mara Reeves was cleaning up Bay 7 and prepping for the next patient. She didn't think about Derek Ramsey at all. 3 days later, Derek came back. Not because he needed to, his hand was healing fine, the stitches holding, but because he'd told his coach he wanted it checked, and his coach had told him to stop being an idiot and leave it alone, which Derek had taken as a challenge. So he showed up at Silver Pine Medical Center on a Sunday afternoon, walked right past the check-in desk, and headed for the ER. Patty saw him coming. "You need to sign in." "I was just here." "I know, sign in anyway." Derek sighed, scrawled his name on the clipboard, and took a seat. This time the wait was shorter, less than 10 minutes, but when the nurse came to get him, it wasn't Mara. It was a guy in his 30s with a shaved head and a name tag that said Carlos. Derek frowned. Where's the other one? Carlos glanced at his tablet. Other one? The nurse. Mara. She's off today. When's she back? Carlos looked at him like he'd just asked what color the sky was. I don't know, man. You want your hand checked or not? Derek followed him back to a different bay, Bay 12 this time, and let Carlos peel off the old bandage. The stitches looked good. No infection, no swelling. Carlos made some notes, told him to keep it clean, and sent him on his way. Derek left annoyed, not because of the hand, because he'd come back expecting something and gotten nothing instead. The next time he returned, 2 days later, claiming the stitches felt tight, it was a different nurse again. A woman in her 40s who looked like she didn't have time for his nonsense and proved it by inspecting his hand in under a minute and sending him home. By the 4th visit, the staff had started to notice. You've been here 3 times in a week, Patty said from behind the desk. Your hand okay? Just being careful. Uh-huh. What? Patty gave him a long look. You want me to page Mara? Just say so. Derek felt his face go hot. I don't. Yeah, you do. She picked up the phone. Give me a sec. 5 minutes later, Mara pushed through the double doors. She wasn't in scrubs this time. She was in jeans and a sweatshirt, hair down, no makeup. She looked even younger out of uniform, tired too. Like she'd been woken up from a nap. She stopped in front of Derek. You've been here 4 times. I'm making sure it heals right. It's healing fine. How do you know? You haven't even looked. Mara sighed. It was a small sound, barely audible, but Derek heard it. She gestured toward the doors. Come on. They went back to Bay 7 again. Mara pulled on gloves, unwrapped his hand, checked the stitches. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 2 days ago. She rewrapped it in silence, taped it down, and stripped off the gloves. There, she said. You're fine. Stop coming back. Derek stayed on the table. What if I want to? Then you're wasting everyone's time. Maybe I like it here. Mara turned to face him, arms crossed. You don't. How do you know? Because nobody likes hospitals. She picked up her tablet. And you're not here for your hand. Derek grinned. You're smart. I'm busy. Doing what? You're not even on shift. Doesn't mean I'm free. So what, you just hang out here on your days off? Mara's jaw tightened. I was covering for someone. Why? Because she asked. Derek leaned forward. You always say yes when people ask? No. So why this time? Mara met his eyes. There was something there, something sharp and guarded, and completely uninterested in whatever game Derek thought they were playing. Because she needed help, and I was available. That's it? That's it. Derek sat back. You're weird. And you're annoying. Mara turned to leave. Wait. She paused at the curtain but didn't turn around. I'm fighting next week, Derek said. At Ironclad. You should come. Mara glanced over her shoulder. Why would I do that? Because I'm good, and you might learn something. About what? Discipline. Control. Actual strength. For a second, Mara just looked at him. Then quietly she said, I already know what strength looks like. And she walked out. Derek sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where she'd been. Then he laughed, short and sharp and genuinely surprised. Okay, he said to no one. Okay. He left the hospital. Didn't come back for 3 days. But when he did, it wasn't for his hand. Bye. The trouble started on a Wednesday. Derek had been training hard, too hard probably, and his coach had pulled him aside after sparring to say he looked sloppy, unfocused. Derek had brushed it off, said he was fine, but the truth was he hadn't slept right in days. He kept thinking about the fight, about winning, about the crowd and the noise and the way it felt when someone went down and stayed down. He'd left the gym around 8, picked up food he didn't eat, and ended up at a bar 2 blocks from his apartment, ordered a beer, then another, sat there scrolling through his phone, looking at old fight videos, old posts, anything to remind himself why he was good at this. By 10, he was drunk enough to think showing up at Silver Pine Medical Center was a good idea. He walked in through the ER entrance past Patty, who wasn't there this time, replaced by some kid who barely looked up, and straight back through the double doors like he owned the place. A couple of nurses glanced at him, but nobody stopped him. Derek made it all the way to Bay 7 before someone finally said something. "Excuse me, sir, you can't be back here." Derek turned. It was Carlos, the guy with the shaved head. He looked annoyed. "I'm looking for someone," Derek said. "Who?" "Mara." Carlos frowned. "She's with a patient." "I'll wait." "You need to wait in the lobby." Derek crossed his arms. "I'm fine here." "Sir, I said I'm fine." Carlos took a step closer. He was bigger than Derek, taller, broader, and his expression had shifted from annoyed to something harder. "You need to leave. Now." Derek felt the heat rising in his chest, the same heat that came before a fight. His hands curled into fists. "Or what?" Carlos didn't blink. "Or I call security and they remove you." "Good luck with that." Somewhere behind them, a door opened. Footsteps. And then Mara's voice, quiet and even. "Derek." He turned. She was standing at the end of the hall, still in scrubs, hair pulled back. She looked calm, too calm. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I wanted to talk to you." "About what?" Derek glanced at Carlos, who was still standing there like a wall. "Alone." Mara didn't move. "I'm working." "Take a break." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I have a patient bleeding in Bay 4 and another one coming in on an ambulance." Her voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath. "So, whatever this is, it needs to wait." Derek felt something crack inside him. The beer, the exhaustion, the week of bad sleep and worse thoughts. It all came spilling out at once. "You think you're better than me?" Mara's expression didn't change. "No." "You act like it." "I act like someone trying to do her job." "Bullshit." Derek stepped forward. "You've been dodging me since day one, acting like I'm some kind of joke." "I don't think you're a joke." "Then what?" Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "I think you're looking for something I can't give you." Derek opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't know what to say to that. Carlos cleared his throat. "Sir, I'm asking you one more time. Leave or I'm calling." "Fine." Derek threw his hands up. "I'm going." He turned and walked toward the exit, but halfway there he stopped, turned back. Mara was still standing in the same spot, watching him with those pale gray eyes. "You know what?" Derek said. "You're right. I was looking for something. I thought maybe you were different, but you're just like everyone else. Cold, fake, hiding behind all that professionalism so you don't have to deal with real people." Mara didn't answer. Derek shook his head. "Forget it." And this time, he left for real. He didn't come back for 5 days. In that time, Derek fought. Won. Celebrated with Leon and a couple other guys from the gym. Got drunk again, slept it off, went back to training. Told himself he didn't care about some weird nurse who couldn't take a compliment. But the thing was, he did care. And he hated that he cared. So on Monday night, after another grueling session that left his knuckles raw and his head pounding, Derek made a decision. He was going back to Silver Pine Medical Center. Not to apologize, not to explain, but to make Mara Reeves understand exactly who she'd dismissed. He walked in just after 9. The ER was busy. Packed, actually, with people spilling out of the waiting room into the hallway. Derek ignored them. Walked straight past the desk, past the security guard who was dealing with someone else, straight through the double doors. This time, nobody stopped him. He found Mara in Bay 11, bent over a patient, an older man clutching his chest. She was moving fast, hands steady, calling out orders to another nurse. Derek stood at the curtain, watching. When she finally looked up and saw him, her face went still. "Derek," she said, "not now. I just want to talk. I'm in the middle of something." "I can see that." She turned back to the patient, adjusting an IV line. "Then wait outside." Derek didn't move. "You owe me a conversation." Mara's head snapped up. "I don't owe you anything." "Yeah, you do." The other nurse, a younger woman Derek didn't recognize, glanced between them, clearly uncomfortable. Mara noticed. She said something too quiet for Derek to hear, and the other nurse nodded and slipped out of the bay. Now it was just the two of them. and the patient who was drifting in and out of consciousness. Mara stepped closer to Derek, voice low. You need to leave. Or what? You'll call security? Go ahead. I'm serious. So am I. She studied him, and for the first time since they'd met, Derek saw something shift in her expression. Not fear, not anger. Something else, something he didn't recognize. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter. You matter, Mara said. You're just not the center of the universe. Derek laughed, harsh, bitter. Says the woman who won't even give me 5 minutes. Because you don't want 5 minutes. You want validation. And I'm not here to give you that. Then what are you here for? Mara's jaw tightened. To save lives. To do my job. To make it through the shift without people like you making it harder. Derek took a step forward. People like me. People who think the world owes them something. And you don't? No. Why not? She didn't answer, just turned back to the patient, checked his vitals, made a note on her tablet. Derek watched her hands, steady, practiced, controlled. He thought about his own hands, the way they shook sometimes after a fight, the way they'd been shaking earlier today when his coach told him he was getting reckless. You ever been in a fight? Derek asked. Mara paused. Not the kind you're talking about. What kind then? She looked at him, and this time there was something raw in her eyes, something that made Derek take a step back without meaning to. The kind where you don't get to walk away if you lose, she said. The words hung in the air between them. Heavy, final. Derek opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't know what to say. And then the monitor next to the patient started beeping, loud, insistent, wrong. Mara's head whipped around. She moved fast, faster than Derek had ever seen anyone move, hands on the patient's chest, calling for the crash cart. The bay exploded into motion. Nurses flooded in, someone wheeled in the defibrillator, and Derek was shoved back against the wall as Mara and the team worked. He watched her hands press down on the man's chest. 1, 2, 3, rhythmic and relentless. Watched her call out instructions without hesitation, without panic. Someone yelled, "Clear!" and the patient's body arced off the table. The monitor beeped once, twice, then settled into a steady rhythm. Mara stepped back, breathing hard. Her hands were shaking now, just a little, barely visible, but Derek saw it. She wiped her forehead, turned, and saw Derek still standing there. Out, she said. Now. This time, Derek went. Bet. He made it halfway down the hall before the security guard caught up to him. Sir, you need to leave the building. Derek didn't argue. He walked out through the double doors, through the waiting room, out into the parking lot where the air was cold and sharp and tasted like rain. He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, staring at the hospital entrance. Inside, Mara Reeves was cleaning up Bay 11, filling out paperwork, moving on to the next patient. And Derek Ramsey was realizing, for the first time in his life, that there were people in the world who didn't care how strong he was. People who'd seen worse, done worse, survived worse. People who made him feel small without even trying. He pulled out his phone, opened his messages, started to type something to Leon, then stopped, deleted it, put the phone away. The rain started, light at first, then heavier. Derek didn't move, just stood there getting soaked, thinking about Mara's hands on that patient's chest and the way she'd looked at him afterward. Like he was in the way. Like he didn't matter. And the worst part was, she was right. The rain soaked through Derek's shirt, cold and relentless, but he stayed in that parking lot for another 20 minutes before finally walking to his car. His hands were still shaking, not from the cold, but from something else, something he couldn't name. He drove home in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the sound of wipers scraping across glass and his own thoughts chewing holes in his head. When he got to his apartment, Leon was there, sprawled on the couch with a controller in his hands, playing some shooter game with the volume too loud. He glanced up when Derek walked in, dripping water onto the hardwood. Dude, you look like shit. Derek peeled off his jacket, threw it over a chair. Thanks. Where have you been? Out. Leon paused the game. Out where? Doesn't matter. The hell it doesn't. You've been weird all week. Leon sat up, studying him. This about that nurse? Derek didn't answer. He went to the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, drank half of it standing there with the door still open. Leon followed him. Bro, seriously, what's going on? Nothing. You're lying. Derek slammed the beer down on the counter, hard enough that foam spilled over the top. I said it's nothing. Leon held up his hands. All right, forget I asked. But he didn't leave. Just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, waiting. Derek wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. You ever meet someone who made you feel like you didn't know anything? Leon frowned. What do you mean? Like, everything you thought you were good at, everything you thought mattered, it all just stopped counting the second they looked at you. This is definitely about the nurse. Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, it is. So what happened? I went back to the hospital tonight. Why? Because I'm an idiot. Derek finished the beer, crushed the can in his fist. I wanted to prove something. I don't even know what. And instead He stopped, shook his head. She saved a guy's life right in front of me. Like it was nothing, and I was just standing there like some useless piece of furniture. Leon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, So she's good at her job. So what? It's not that. Then what is it? Derek looked at him. She doesn't need me. Doesn't need anyone. And I can't figure out if that's the most badass thing I've ever seen or if it just makes me feel like garbage. Leon let out a low whistle. Man, you got it bad. I don't got anything. You're standing in your kitchen at 11 at night, having an existential crisis over a girl who won't give you the time of day. That's not nothing. Oh. Derek wanted to argue. Wanted to say Leon had it all wrong, but he couldn't because Leon was right. What do I do? Derek asked. Leon shrugged. Stop being a dumbass. Stop showing up at her job like some stalker. And maybe, just maybe, figure out why you care so much about someone who clearly doesn't care about you. The words hit harder than Derek expected. He stood there, dripping water onto the kitchen floor, and realized he didn't have an answer. Leon clapped him on the shoulder. Get some sleep, man. You'll feel better in the morning. But Derek didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the night over and over, Mara's hands on that patient's chest, the way she'd moved without hesitation, the way she'd looked at him afterward like he was just another obstacle in her way. By the time the sun came up, Derek had made a decision. He wasn't going back to Silver Pine Medical Center. He was done chasing someone who didn't want to be found. For 2 weeks, Derek kept his word. He trained harder than he had in months, threw himself into sparring sessions that left him bruised and exhausted, and took a fight on short notice against a guy from out of state who had a reputation for ending matches early. Derek won. Barely. Took a knee to the ribs in the second round that knocked the wind out of him and made him see stars, but he recovered, pushed through, landed a combination that dropped his opponent and sealed the win. The crowd roared. His coach clapped him on the back. Leon bought him a beer afterward and said he'd looked like the old Derek out there, focused, hungry, unstoppable. But Derek didn't feel unstoppable. He felt hollow. He went home that night with a trophy he didn't care about and a check he'd deposit and forget. Sat on his couch in the dark, scrolling through his phone, looking at photos of himself mid-fight, fist raised, face twisted in a snarl that was supposed to be victory. He looked angry. He looked small. Derek deleted the photos. On a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the incident in the ER, Derek's coach called him into the office at Ironclad Gym. The office was a cramped space above the main floor, walls covered in posters of old fights and faded motivational quotes that nobody read. Derek's coach, a barrel-chested man named Frank who'd been training fighters for 30 years, sat behind a desk piled with paperwork and energy drink cans. Sit, Frank said. Derek sat. Frank leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You've been off. I'm fine. You're not. Frank tapped a pen against the desk. You won last week, yeah. But you were sloppy, took hits you shouldn't have taken, left yourself open. I won. Barely. Derek's jaw tightened. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me what's going on in your head, because whatever it is, it's affecting your performance. Nothing's going on. Frank stared at him for a long moment. Then he sighed. You know what your problem is, Derek? I'm sure you're about to tell me. You fight angry, always have, And anger's a good fuel. It gets you through the hard stuff, keeps you moving when you want to quit. But it's not enough, not if you want to go anywhere real. Derek looked away. I'm doing fine. You're doing okay. There's a difference. Frank leaned forward. You want to know what separates good fighters from great ones? What? Great fighters know why they're in the ring. They're not just swinging to prove something. They've got purpose, discipline. They've done the work on the inside, not just the outside. Derek felt something twist in his chest. You think I haven't done the work? I think you're still figuring out what the work is. The words hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Derek stood. I should get back to training. Frank didn't stop him, just watched as Derek walked out, shoulders tight, hands curled into fists. Go. That night, Derek went to a bar he didn't usually go to, a quiet place on the east side of Silver Pine where the lights were dim and the music was low and nobody knew his name. He ordered a whiskey, nursed it slow, and tried not to think about anything. It didn't work. He kept seeing Mara's face, kept hearing her voice, the kind where you don't get to walk away if you lose. What did that mean? What kind of fight didn't let you walk away? Derek ordered another drink. And another. By the time he left, it was past midnight, and the world had gone soft around the edges. He walked back to his car, fumbled with his keys, and was about to get in when someone called his name. Derek Ramsey? He turned. A man was standing a few feet away, mid-40s maybe, wearing a jacket with a hospital logo on the chest. Derek squinted, trying to place him. Do I know you? The man stepped closer. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of posture that screamed military even in civilian clothes. No, but I know you. Derek frowned. How? You've been making a habit of showing up at Silver Pine Medical Center, bothering the staff. Derek's stomach dropped. Who are you? Security. Name's Marcus. He tilted his head, studying Derek like he was a puzzle that needed solving. You've been warned before, multiple times, and yet you keep coming back. I haven't been there in weeks. I know, that's the only reason we're having a conversation instead of filing a restraining order. Derek's hands clenched. I didn't do anything. You harassed a nurse, refused to leave when asked, created a disturbance in an active treatment area. Marcus's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. That's plenty. I don't care what you were just doing. Marcus took another step forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from Silver Pine. You're going to stop asking about Mara Reeves, and if I see you anywhere near that hospital again, I'm calling the cops. Understood? Derek wanted to argue, wanted to tell this guy to go to hell, but something in Marcus's eyes stopped him, a kind of quiet certainty that said he'd done this before and would do it again without hesitation. Fine, Derek said. Good. Marcus started to walk away, then paused, looked back. You know, I've seen guys like you before. Guys who think they're tough because they can throw a punch. But you want to know the truth? Derek didn't answer. The gun was small, a snub-nosed revolver that looked almost toy-like in the man's tattooed hand. But Derek had been around enough violence to know size didn't matter. What mattered was intent, and the look on the man's face said he had plenty. Nobody moves, the man said. His voice was steady, controlled, nothing like the panic Derek expected. Nobody calls anybody. You all just stay right where you are. The hallway froze. Two nurses near the supply closet went still, hands half raised. An orderly pushing a cart stopped mid-step. And Mara had been 3 feet from the doorway when the man appeared, close enough that Derek could see her calculating the distance, the angle, the odds. She didn't move back, didn't move forward, just stood there, hands visible, expression neutral. Your friend's in surgery, she said. He's being taken care of. I don't give a damn about surgery. The man's eyes swept the hallway, landing on each person for just a second before moving on. When he got to Derek, he paused. You, the one with the busted face, get over here. Derek's heart slammed against his ribs. Why? Because I said so. Derek didn't move. The man raised the gun slightly, not pointing it at anyone in particular, just making sure everyone remembered it was there. I'm not asking twice. Mara's voice cut in, still calm, still steady. What do you want? The man's attention snapped to her. What I want is for people to mind their own business. But since we're past that, he gestured with the gun toward Bay 3. My boy in there, the one you people are cutting open, he's got something the cops would be real interested in, and I need it back before they show up. He doesn't have anything, Mara said. He came in with a stab wound. That's it. Don't lie to me. The man took a step into the hallway. He had a bag, small, black, would have been in his pocket or taped to his leg. You people took it when you stripped him down. Mara shook her head. We don't keep personal belongings in the OR. They're logged and stored in. I know how it works. The man's jaw tightened. Which is why you're going to take me to where they keep that stuff. Right now. Derek watched Mara's face, saw the way her eyes flicked to the security camera in the corner, then back to the man. Calculating, planning. Security's already been notified, she said. The alarm triggered automatically when the bay door opened during a restricted procedure. They're on their way. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we better hurry. He moved fast, faster than Derek expected, closing the distance to Mara and grabbing her arm. She didn't resist, didn't pull away, just let herself be moved as the man backed toward the nurse's station, gun now pressed against her side. Everyone stays put, he said. Anyone moves, anyone calls out, she gets hurt. Understand? The hallway stayed silent. Derek's hands were shaking. He forced them still. The man looked at him. You. I said get over here. Derek moved. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to fight, to do something other than walk toward a man holding a gun, but his feet carried him forward anyway. When he was close enough, the man grabbed his shoulder and shoved him toward the nurse's station. Both of you, back there, now. Mara moved first, stepping behind the desk with her hands still visible. Derek followed, his ribs screaming with every breath. The man stayed on the other side, gun tracking between them. Where's the storage? He asked. Mara pointed down a hallway to the left. End of the hall, room 140, but it's locked. You need a key card. The man looked at the lanyard around her neck. Like that one? She didn't answer. Take it off. Slide it over here. Mara's hand went to the lanyard. Her fingers brushed the plastic card, and for just a second Derek saw something flicker across her face. Not fear, but recognition. Like she'd been in this exact situation before and knew how it ended. She unclipped the card, slid it across the desk. The man picked it up, checked it, clipped it to his own belt. Good. Now here's what's going to happen. You two are going to walk with me to that storage room. You're going to open it. I'm going to get what I came for, and then I'm going to leave. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody plays hero. Simple. Derek glanced at Mara. She was staring at the man, expression unreadable. What if it's not there? She asked. Then we've got a problem. And if security shows up before we get there? The man's grip on the gun tightened. Then we've got a bigger problem. Now move. They moved. Out from behind the desk, past the frozen nurses, down the hallway toward the back of the ER. The man stayed close, gun low but ready, eyes scanning every corner. Derek's mind raced. He should do something, should tackle the guy, should grab the gun, should what? Get shot? Get Mara shot? He'd never felt more useless in his life. They reached the storage room. Mara swiped the key card. The lock clicked. The door swung open to reveal a small space lined with metal shelves, each one holding labeled bins and plastic bags. Find it, the man said. Mara stepped inside. Derek followed. The man stayed in the doorway, blocking their exit. Mara started checking bins, moving methodically through each shelf. Derek stood next to her, hands clenched, watching the man watch them. How do you know it's here? Derek asked quietly. The man didn't take his eyes off Mara. Because it's always here. Hospitals don't throw anything away. They log it, bag it, lock it up. Standard procedure. He shifted his weight. Hurry up. Mara pulled down another bin, opened it. Inside were several clear bags, each one containing clothing, wallets, phones, personal effects from patients who'd come through the ER. She sorted through them quickly, checking labels. What's your friend's name? She asked. Marcus. Derek's head snapped up. What? The man smirked. Not your Marcus, different guy. Mara found the right bag, held it up. Marcus Holloway? That's him. She opened the bag. Inside were jeans, a blood-soaked shirt, a phone with a cracked screen, and a small black pouch sealed with duct tape. The man's eyes lit up. That's it. Give it here. Mara didn't move. This is evidence. If I hand it to you, I'm complicit in whatever. I don't care. The man raised the gun, pointing it directly at her chest. Give it to me. Now. Mara's hand tightened on the bag. For a long, terrible moment, Derek thought she was going to refuse. Thought she was going to choose principles over survival, the way someone who'd been trained to stand their ground might. But then she tossed the bag to him. The man caught it one-handed, checked inside. Whatever he saw made him relax, just slightly. Good. See? That wasn't hard. He backed out of the storage room, gun still trained on them. Stay in there. Count to 60. Don't come out before then. Don't call anyone. Just stay put and wait. And then he was gone. Footsteps echoing down the hallway. Derek looked at Mara. We need to... Wait. He's getting away. I know. Derek moved toward the door. Mara grabbed his arm, pulled him back. I said wait. Why? She held up her other hand. In it was a second key card, identical to the one she'd given the man, except this one had a thin strip of red tape along the edge. That wasn't my card, she said. Derek stared. What? The one I gave him. It's a dummy. Deactivated 2 months ago when the system was upgraded. I kept it in my pocket in case... She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter. Point is, he can't get out of the building with it. Every exit requires an active card. The second he tries to leave, the door locks and security gets pinged. Derek's mind struggled to catch up. You planned this? I've been in worse situations. But Mara moved to the door, peered out into the hallway. He'll figure it out in about 30 seconds. When he does, he's going to panic. And when people panic, they make mistakes. Or they start shooting. Mara looked at him. Which is why we need to stay out of his way and let the professionals handle it. But even as she said it, Derek heard raised voices from somewhere down the hall. Then a shout. Then the unmistakable sound of the fire alarm being pulled. A shrill, continuous wail that made his already pounding head feel like it was splitting open. Mara cursed under her breath. He's trying to trigger an evacuation. Force the doors open. Will it work? No. Fire protocols lock everything down until the all clear. He just trapped himself. She stepped out into the hallway. But he doesn't know that yet. Derek followed her. The hallway was chaos now. Nurses herding patients toward designated safe zones, staff grabbing emergency kits, someone yelling about the lockdown procedure. Through it all, the alarm screamed. And then Derek saw him. The man with the gun, standing at the main exit, slamming his fist against the glass as the door refused to open. He still had the black pouch in one hand, the gun in the other. When he turned and saw Mara, his face twisted with rage. You bitch, he snarled. You set me up. Mara stopped walking, held up her hands. I followed your instructions. Not my fault you didn't think it through. That card was supposed to work. It did work. 2 months ago. The man raised the gun. Open the door. I can't. System's locked down. Only way to override it is from the security office, and that requires... The man fired. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, a crack that punched through the alarm and made Derek's ears ring. The bullet hit the wall 2 feet to Mara's left, punching a hole in the drywall and sending dust flying. Mara didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there, hands still raised, eyes locked on the man. Next one goes in your leg, the man said. Then your gut. Then wherever I feel like. Open the door. I told you I can't. He fired again. This time the bullet hit the floor between them, ricocheting off the tile with a whine that made Derek's teeth ache. Mara's voice stayed level. Shooting me doesn't change the facts. The system is automated. I don't control it. Then who does? Security. They're already on their way. The man's eyes darted around the hallway, looking for another exit, another option. Derek could see him spiraling, the control he'd had earlier dissolving into desperation. There's another way out, Derek heard himself say. Both Mara and the man looked at him. Derek swallowed. Service entrance, loading dock, east side of the building. No electronic lock, just a push bar. The man's eyes narrowed. You lying to me? No. Derek's voice was steadier than he felt. I've seen it. Came through there once when the front was packed. It was a lie. Derek had never seen a service entrance, had no idea if one even existed. But he needed to get this guy moving, needed to get him away from Mara and the patients and anyone else he might hurt. The man studied him for a long moment. Then he grabbed Derek's collar, yanked him close. "Show me." Derek's ribs screamed. He bit back a gasp. "Let go and I will." The man released him, stepped back. "Move. Fast. And if you're lying, I'm putting a bullet in your spine." Derek started walking. Behind him, he heard Mara's voice, sharp and urgent. "Derek, don't—" But he was already moving, leading the man down a different hallway, away from the main ER, away from the people who couldn't defend themselves. The man stayed close, gun pressed against Derek's back. "Where is it?" the man demanded. "Near the cafeteria. Just keep walking." They turned a corner. The hallway here was empty, quieter, the alarm muffled by distance. Derek's mind raced. He'd bought maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. And when they reached the cafeteria and there was no service entrance, the man would know he'd been played. Derek needed a plan, needed something. What he had was bruised ribs, a concussion, and a lifetime of fighting in controlled environments where the worst that happened was you lost and tried again next week. This wasn't that. This was real. This was final. And Derek had no idea what to do. They reached the cafeteria. It was closed, dark, chairs stacked on tables. Derek walked through it slowly, buying time, eyes scanning for anything he could use. A fire extinguisher on the wall, a mop bucket near the back, a serving cart with metal trays. The man shoved him forward. "I don't see a door." "It's past the kitchen." "Then move." Derek pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen. Stainless steel counters, industrial ovens, a walk-in freezer with a heavy door. Still no service entrance, because there wasn't one. The man grabbed Derek's shoulder, spun him around. "You lied. I thought—" The man hit him. Not with the gun, just his fist, but it caught Derek on his already bruised jaw and sent him stumbling into a counter, his vision blurred, tasted blood. "You thought what?" the man said. "That you'd be a hero? That you'd save the day?" Derek spat red onto the floor. "I thought I'd give them time to lock you down." The man's expression went cold. "Wrong answer." He raised the gun. Derek knew, in that moment, that he was about to die. Knew it with the same certainty he'd known anything in his life. And then the kitchen door exploded inward, and Marcus, the real Marcus, the security guard, came through with a tactical baton in one hand and a look on his face that could have stopped a freight train. The man with the gun spun, fired. The shot went wide, shattering a window above the sink. Marcus closed the distance in 3 steps, brought the baton down on the man's wrist with a crack Derek felt in his bones. The gun clattered to the floor. Marcus kicked it away, drove an elbow into the man's face, followed it with a knee to the gut that doubled him over. The man tried to swing, tried to run, but Marcus was faster, better, trained for exactly this. He put the man on the ground in under 5 seconds, knee on his back, cuffing his wrists with zip ties he'd pulled from somewhere. It was over before Derek's brain caught up to what had happened. Marcus looked up at him. "You okay?" Derek nodded. Couldn't speak. "Good. Stay put. Cops are on their way." Marcus pulled out a radio, spoke into it. "Suspect secure, kitchen area. Need medical for potential head trauma and—" He glanced at Derek. "Previous injuries." Derek leaned against the counter, legs shaking. His ribs hurt. His face hurt. Everything hurt. But he was alive. Marcus finished with the radio, stood, walked over to Derek. "That was stupid what you did." Derek managed a laugh that came out more like a cough. "Yeah. Could have gotten yourself killed." "I know. So why'd you do it?" Derek thought about Mara, about the patients, about all the people in that hallway who'd been frozen with fear while a man with a gun made demands. "Because someone had to," he said. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Maybe you're not as dumb as I thought." The cops arrived 3 minutes later, 4 of them, moving fast and efficient, taking over from Marcus, checking the suspect, clearing the area. One of them took Derek's statement while a paramedic checked his vitals and shone a light in his eyes and told him he probably had a concussion and should really sit down. Derek sat. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see more cops arriving, could hear radios crackling, could feel the organized chaos of an incident being processed and contained. The fire alarm had been silenced. The lockdown was being lifted, and somewhere in all of it, Mara was probably going back to work like nothing had happened. One of the cops, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, came over to Derek. "You're lucky," she said. "Doesn't feel like it. Trust me. Guy like that, desperate and cornered, you're lucky you're still breathing." She flipped her notebook closed. "We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow. Give a full statement. For now, get yourself checked out and don't leave town." Derek almost laughed. Where would he go? The paramedic who'd checked him earlier came back with a wheelchair. "Hospital policy, you're not walking out after that." "I'm fine." "You're getting in the chair." Derek got in the chair. They wheeled him back through the cafeteria, down the hallway, past cops and hospital staff and people who stared at him like he'd grown a second head. When they reached the ER, Derek saw Mara standing at the nurse's station, talking to a doctor. She looked up, met his eyes. Derek raised a hand, a half wave, awkward and stupid. Mara didn't wave back, just watched as they wheeled him past, her expression unreadable. And then she was gone, swallowed by the chaos, and Derek was being taken to an exam room where another doctor checked him over and confirmed what everyone already knew: concussion, bruised ribs, facial trauma, no internal bleeding, no permanent damage. Lucky. Derek sat on the exam table while the doctor wrote notes and rattled off instructions about rest and ice and follow-up appointments. None of it stuck. He was too tired, too wrung out, too aware that he'd just lived through something that should have killed him. When the doctor left, Leon showed up. Someone must have called him. He looked at Derek, at the fresh bandages and the police officer still lingering outside the door, and said, "What the hell happened?" Derek told him. All of it. The gun, the hallway, the lie about the service entrance, Marcus taking the guy down. Leon listened without interrupting. When Derek finished, he just shook his head. "You're an idiot." "Yeah." "You could have died." "Yeah." "So why'd you do it?" Derek looked at his hands. They were shaking again. "I don't know. I couldn't stand there and do nothing." Leon sat down in the plastic chair next to the exam table. "You know what Frank always says about knowing why you're in the ring?" Derek nodded. "I think you just figured it out." Derek wanted to argue, wanted to say it wasn't that simple, that he'd just been scared and stupid and desperate. But maybe Leon was right. Maybe for the first time in his life, Derek had fought for something other than himself. And maybe that mattered. They kept Derek for observation. Not in a room, just a bed in a corner of the ER with a curtain pulled around it, because the hospital was too full to admit him and too liability conscious to let him leave. A nurse checked on him every hour. Marcus stopped by once, said the suspect was in custody and Derek's statement had been helpful. Derek asked about Mara. Marcus just smiled. "She's working." Of course she was. Derek slept in fits, waking every time someone walked past the curtain or a monitor beeped or his ribs shifted wrong. At some point during the night, he heard voices, low, urgent, and recognized one of them as Mara's. He sat up, winced, pulled the curtain back just enough to see. Mara was standing with a man in a suit, late 50s, gray hair, posture that screamed military even in civilian clothes. They were talking quietly, heads close together, and Derek caught fragments. Should have called it in immediately. "Patients were at risk. I made a judgment call. Not your job to make tactical decisions anymore." Mara's voice went flat. "With all due respect, sir, I know how to handle a hostile situation." The man's expression softened. "I know you do, but you're not in the field anymore. You're a civilian, and civilians follow protocol." "Protocol would have gotten someone killed." "Maybe. Or maybe you just can't let go of who you used to be." Mara didn't respond, just stood there, jaw tight, hands clenched. The man sighed. "I'm not writing you up, but I am recommending you take a few days, decompress, talk to someone." "I don't need—" "That wasn't a suggestion." Mara's shoulders sagged, just slightly. "Understood." The man left. Mara stood there for a moment longer, alone in the hallway, and Derek saw something in her posture he'd never seen before: exhaustion. Real, bone-deep exhaustion. She turned and saw him watching. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Mara walked over, stopped at the edge of his curtained space. "You should be asleep." "So should you." "I'm working." You're always working. She almost smiled. Almost. Someone has to. Derek shifted on the bed, making room. Sit. I can't. Why not? Because I'm on shift. Take a break. Mara hesitated. Then slowly she sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle him. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the ambient noise of the ER, beeping monitors, distant conversations, the hum of ventilation. You did something really stupid tonight, Mara said finally. I know. You could have been killed. I know that too. So why'd you do it? Derek looked at her, really looked, saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was still standing in a war zone even though the war was over. Because you would have done the same thing, he said. And I wanted to be the kind of person who could. Mara's expression shifted. Something vulnerable flickered across her face, there and gone so fast Derek almost missed it. You don't know what kind of person I am. I know enough. You don't. She looked away. You think I'm strong. You think I've got it figured out. But the truth is, I'm just better at hiding it. Hiding what? How broken I am. The words hung in the air between them. Derek didn't know what to say. Didn't know if there was anything to say. Mara stood. You should rest. Doctor wants to keep you until morning. Make sure the concussion symptoms don't get worse. Mara? She paused at the curtain. Thank you, Derek said, for the card thing, for the plan, for everything. Mara looked back at him. Don't thank me. You're the one who put yourself between him and everyone else. That took guts. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. She pulled the curtain closed. Get some sleep, Derek. And then she was gone. Derek lay back, staring at the ceiling, Mara's words echoing in his head. I'm just better at hiding it. He thought about the photo Leon had shown him, about the convoy ambush, about the things Mara had seen and done and survived. And he thought about the fact that she was still here, still showing up, still saving lives, even when it cost her pieces of herself. Derek closed his eyes, tried to sleep, failed. Somewhere on the other side of the curtain, Mara was checking vitals, administering medication, doing the work she'd dedicated her life to. And for the first time, Derek understood what Marcus had meant, what Frank had meant, what everyone had been trying to tell him. Strength wasn't about winning. It was about showing up even when you were broken, especially when you were broken. Derek drifted off sometime after 3 a.m. When he woke, it was to the sound of raised voices and running feet and someone yelling about an incoming trauma. He sat up, groggy and disoriented, pulled back the curtain. The ER was in chaos. Nurses were clearing space, wheeling gurneys, prepping equipment. Through the double doors came paramedics pushing a stretcher, moving fast, one of them doing chest compressions on a patient Derek couldn't see. GSW to the chest and abdomen, one of the paramedics was shouting. BP's crashing, pulse thready. We've lost him twice already. The stretcher rolled past Derek's curtain. He caught a glimpse of the patient, young, maybe early 20s, covered in blood, and wearing a jacket with a logo Derek recognized. Ironclad Jim. Derek's heart stopped. He knew that jacket, knew that kid. His name was Tyler. He'd started training at the gym 6 months ago, quiet and awkward, always the first one there and the last one to leave. Derek had sparred with him a few times, given him pointers, told him he had potential. Now Tyler was dying on a stretcher in Silver Pine Medical Center. Derek pushed off the bed, ignoring the pain in his ribs, and stumbled into the hallway. A nurse tried to stop him. He pushed past her. Derek! Mara's voice, she was standing near the trauma bay, already gloved and ready. You need to get back. That's Tyler, Derek said. I know him. I don't care. You can't be here. What happened to him? Mara's expression was grim. Same thing that happened to the last kid. Wrong place, wrong people. Is he going to make it? She didn't answer, just turned and disappeared into the trauma bay. Derek stood in the hallway, breathing hard, hands shaking, and felt the world tilt sideways. This was his fault. Not directly, not obviously, but the connection was there. Tyler had looked up to him, had wanted to be like him. And now Tyler was on a table fighting for his life because he'd gotten caught up in the same world of violence and ego and reckless stupidity that Derek had been drowning in for years. Derek turned and walked back to his curtained space, sat on the bed, put his head in his hands. Behind him, through the walls, he could hear the trauma team working, hear the steady monotone of medical jargon, the beeping of monitors, the controlled urgency of people trying to save a life. And then he heard the sound he'd been dreading, the long, flat tone of a monitor going silent. Someone called for the crash cart. Someone else called time of death. And Derek sat there, alone behind a curtain, and felt something inside him finally, irreversibly break. Real toughness isn't about how hard you hit. It's about how much you can take and still keep going. It's about showing up when it matters, not just when it's convenient. Marcus shook his head. Mara, she's got that. You? You're still figuring out the difference. And then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the parking lot. Derek stood there for a long time, keys in hand, the world spinning slow and cold around him. The next morning, Derek woke up with a headache and a decision. He was going to prove Marcus wrong. He was going to prove all of them wrong. He just didn't know how yet. He spent the day training, running drills, hitting bags, sparring with anyone who'd take him on. Pushed himself until his lungs burned and his muscles screamed and he couldn't think about anything except the next punch, the next move, the next breath. When he got home that night, exhausted and sore, he found a message waiting on his phone. Unknown number. He almost deleted it, but something made him open it instead. The message was short. You don't know her. Stop pretending you do. Derek stared at the screen, typed back, Who is this? No response. He tried calling the number. It rang twice, then went to a generic voicemail. He hung up, heart pounding. Someone was watching him. Someone who knew about Mara. Derek sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, and felt something shift inside him. Not anger this time, something colder, more focused. He opened his laptop, pulled up a search engine, and typed in Mara Reeves Silverpine. Nothing came up. No social media, no public records, just a single mention in a hospital staff directory that listed her as an ER nurse with no photo, no bio, no details. Derek tried different searches. Mara Reeves military, Mara Reeves veteran, Mara Reeves combat, still nothing. It was like she didn't exist before Silverpine, like she'd appeared out of nowhere 14 months ago and built a life out of silence and routine. Derek closed the laptop, leaned back, thought about what Marcus had said. Real toughness is about how much you can take and still keep going. What had Mara taken? What had she survived? And why did she hide it so carefully? What? 2 days later, Derek got his answer. He was at Ironclad, wrapping his hands before a training session, when Leon walked over with his phone out. Dude, you need to see this. Derek glanced up. See what? Leon turned the phone around. On the screen was a news article from 5 years ago, headline in bold. Convoy ambush leaves 3 dead, 2 wounded in classified operation. Derek scanned the text. It was vague, most of it redacted, but it mentioned a specialist team operating in a hostile region, an attack that had gone wrong, and survivors who'd been extracted under fire. Why are you showing me this? Derek asked. Leon scrolled down to a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance, showing a group of soldiers in tactical gear standing outside a transport vehicle. Most of their faces were obscured, but one figure was visible in profile. A woman, smaller than the others, with dark hair pulled back tight. Derek's breath caught. That's her, Leon said. Isn't it? Derek took the phone, zoomed in on the photo. The resolution was terrible, the image washed out by sunlight, but the posture was unmistakable. The way she stood, balanced, alert, ready. It was Mara. Where did you find this? Derek asked. Random deep dive. I was bored. Leon shrugged. I remembered you said she was military, so I started searching. Took a while, but yeah. Derek read the article again. It didn't name any of the soldiers, didn't give details about what they'd been doing or where they'd been, just called them specialists and moved on. What do you think she did? Leon asked. Derek didn't answer. He was still staring at the photo, at the woman who looked like Mara, but also didn't. This version was harder, sharper, like she'd been forged in something Derek couldn't imagine. I think, Derek said slowly, she did things we'll never know about. Leon took his phone back. You still into her? Derek laughed, short, humorless. I don't think into is the right word anymore. What is? Derek thought about it. About Mara's eyes when she'd said the kind where you don't get to walk away if you lose. About the way she'd saved that man's life without hesitation. About the silence she carried like armor. I think, Derek said, I'm scared of her. Leon blinked. Seriously? Yeah. Derek started wrapping his hands again, pulling the tape tight. And I think that's the first smart thing I've felt in a long time. The fight that changed everything happened on a Saturday night. Derek wasn't supposed to be there. He'd turned down the match when Frank first mentioned it. Some underground event in a warehouse on the outskirts of Silver Pine. No sanctioning, no rules, cash prize only. The kind of thing that attracted people who didn't care about regulations or safety. But Derek's rent was due, and the last fight's payout had gone to cover his car insurance and a bar tab he'd forgotten about, so when Frank called again and said the spot was still open, Derek said yes. The warehouse was exactly what he expected. Concrete floors, exposed beams, a makeshift ring in the center surrounded by a crowd that smelled like sweat and beer and adrenaline. Derek changed in a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a decade, wrapping his hands and trying not to think too hard about what he was doing. Leon showed up just before the match started. You sure about this? Derek tightened the tape. No. Then why are you doing it? Because I need the money. Bullshit. You could pick up extra shifts at the gym. You could... Leon. Derek looked at him. I need to hit something, okay? I need to stop thinking for a while. Leon didn't argue, just handed him a water bottle and stepped back. The fight started at 10. Derek's opponent was a guy named Bryce, 6'3", 230 pounds, with a record that Frank hadn't been able to verify but claimed was impressive. Derek took one look at him and knew this was going to hurt. The bell rang. They circled each other. Bryce moved slow, methodical, like he was in no rush. Derek feinted left, threw a jab. Bryce blocked it, countered with a hook that caught Derek on the temple and made his vision blur. The crowd roared. Derek shook it off, came back with a combination. Body shot, uppercut, another jab. Bryce took them all without flinching. Then he stepped in close and drove a knee into Derek's ribs that folded him in half. Derek hit the mat. The referee, a guy in a stained t-shirt who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, started counting. Derek got up at 6. His ribs screamed, his head throbbed, but he got up. Bryce smiled. You got heart, kid, but that's not going to save you. They went another round. Derek landed a few good hits, a cross that split Bryce's lip, an elbow that opened a cut above his eye. But Bryce kept coming, kept pushing. And Derek realized somewhere in the middle of the second round that he was outmatched. Not just in size, in experience, in control. Bryce fought like someone who'd done this 1,000 times, who knew exactly how much to give and when to take, who didn't need anger or adrenaline because he had something better. Discipline. Derek thought about Frank's words. Great fighters know why they're in the ring. He thought about Mara, about the way she'd moved in that ER bay, calm and certain, like she'd already decided how it was going to end. And he realized, in that moment, that he didn't know why he was here. Bryce threw a punch. Derek didn't see it coming. Everything went black. When Derek woke up, he was on his back, staring at the warehouse ceiling. His face hurt. His ribs hurt. Everything hurt. Leon's voice came from somewhere above him. He's awake. Someone else, a medic, maybe, or just someone who knew first aid, shone a light in Derek's eyes. Can you hear me? Derek nodded, tried to sit up. The world spun. Easy, the medic said. You took a hard hit, might have a concussion. I'm fine. You're not. Leon crouched next to him. Dude, you were out for like 30 seconds. We need to get you to a hospital. Derek shook his head, regretted it immediately. No hospital. You need to get checked out. I said no. Leon looked at the medic, who shrugged. It's his call, but if he starts vomiting or loses consciousness again, call an ambulance. They helped Derek to his feet. He stood there, swaying, tasting blood. The crowd had already moved on, focused on the next fight. Bryce was gone. The money was gone. All Derek had was a ringing in his ears and the certainty that he'd just lost more than a match. Leon drove him home. helped him up the stairs to his apartment, got him onto the couch and brought him water and painkillers and a bag of frozen peas for his face. "You're an idiot," Leon said. Derek didn't argue. "What were you trying to prove?" Derek closed his eyes. "I don't know. You could have gotten seriously hurt." "I did get seriously hurt." Leon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You need to figure your shit out, man, because this isn't working." Derek knew he was right. He just didn't know how to fix it. He slept on the couch that night, waking up every few hours with his head pounding and his ribs aching. By morning, he looked like he'd gone 10 rounds with a truck. His left eye was swollen shut, his jaw bruised purple, his ribs so tender he could barely breathe. Leon had left a note on the kitchen counter. "If you die, I'm taking your TV." Derek almost smiled. Almost. He spent the next 2 days on the couch, drifting in and out of sleep, eating nothing, ignoring calls from Frank and texts from people who'd heard about the fight and wanted details. He didn't have details. He just had pain and regret, and the growing realization that he'd hit bottom and didn't know how to climb back up. On the third day, there was a knock at his door. Derek ignored it. The knocking continued. He dragged himself off the couch, every movement agony, and opened the door ready to tell whoever it was to go away. It was Marcus, the security guard from Silverpine. Derek stared. "What are you doing here?" Marcus looked him up and down, taking in the bruises, the swelling, the way Derek was holding his ribs. "Heard you got your ass kicked. Word travels fast. Small city." Marcus stepped inside without asking. "You look like hell." "Thanks." Marcus walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, pulled out a beer, opened it, drank. Derek just stood there, too tired to protest. "You gonna tell me why you're here?" Derek asked. Marcus set the beer down. "Because Mara asked me to check on you." Derek felt like he'd been punched again. "What?" "She heard about the fight, heard you got hurt. She wanted to make sure you were okay. Why would she care?" Marcus shrugged. "Beats me. But she does." He picked up the beer again. "So here I am." Derek sank into a chair, wincing. "I don't need anyone checking on me." "Yeah, you do." Marcus pulled out another chair, sat down. "You're spiraling, kid. Anyone can see it." "I'm fine." "You just got knocked unconscious in an illegal fight for pocket change. You're not fine." Derek looked away. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to stop lying to yourself." Marcus leaned forward. "You know what Mara told me once? She said the hardest part of leaving the military wasn't the danger. It was figuring out who she was without it." Derek looked up. "She said that?" "Yeah, she did." Marcus took another drink. "She spent 6 years being one thing, and when that ended, she had to rebuild from scratch. Learn how to be normal, how to exist without the structure, the mission, the purpose." He set the bottle down. "Sound familiar?" Derek's throat tightened. "I'm not military." "No, but you're the same kind of lost." Marcus stood. "You want my advice? Stop chasing her, stop trying to prove something, and figure out who you are when you're not angry." He walked to the door, paused. "She's working tonight. Graveyard shift. If you want to talk to her, that's your window. But Derek?" He looked back. "Don't go unless you're ready to hear what she has to say." And then he was gone. Derek sat in his kitchen, staring at nothing, Marcus's words echoing in his head. Figure out who you are when you're not angry. He thought about the fight, about Bryce's calm, controlled power, about Mara's hands saving a life while Derek stood uselessly by. He thought about the photo Leon had shown him, Mara in tactical gear, standing in a place Derek couldn't imagine, doing things he'd never understand. And he thought about the question he'd been avoiding since the day they met. Who was he without the anger? Derek didn't know, but maybe it was time to find out. At 11 that night, Derek got in his car and drove to Silverpine Medical Center. His ribs still hurt. His face was still a mess. But he drove anyway, hands tight on the wheel, heart hammering against his bruised chest. The parking lot was half empty. He pulled into a spot near the back, killed the engine, and sat there in the dark, trying to figure out what he was going to say. He didn't have a plan, didn't have a script, just the certainty that if he didn't do this now, he never would. Derek got out of the car, walked across the parking lot, pushed through the entrance doors. The ER was quiet, A few people in the waiting room, a nurse at the desk he didn't recognize. He walked past her, expecting someone to stop him, but no one did. He made it all the way to the double doors before he saw her. Mara was standing at the nurse's station, writing something on a chart. She looked tired, hair falling out of its ponytail, smudges of something dark on her scrubs. But steady, always steady. Derek stopped, took a breath, started to walk toward her, and then the doors behind him burst open and someone shouted, "We need help! Now!" Mara's head snapped up. Derek turned. 2 men were carrying a third between them. A young guy, maybe 20, with blood soaking through his shirt and dripping onto the floor. His face was gray, his breathing shallow. Mara moved instantly. "Get him to Bay 3. What happened?" "Stabbed," one of the men said. "Some fight downtown. We didn't know where else. Bay 3. Now." The men half carried, half dragged the injured guy toward the bay. Mara was already calling for help, pulling on gloves, moving with the same controlled urgency Derek had seen before. And then she saw him. For a second, their eyes met. Derek saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. But it was gone as fast as it came. "Derek," she said, "not now." But she didn't sound angry, just focused. Derek stepped back, watched as the injured man was laid on a table, watched as Mara's hands went to work, assessing, stabilizing, moving faster than seemed possible. One of the men who'd brought him in, a guy in his 30s with gang tattoos and a look that said he'd seen this before, glanced at Derek. "You just gonna stand there?" Derek didn't answer. The guy stepped closer. "I said," and then Mara's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and clear. "Both of you, out, now." The guy with the tattoos hesitated. "But I said out." He backed off, walked toward the exit, muttering something Derek didn't catch. Derek stayed where he was. Mara looked up from the patient, met his eyes. "I'm serious, Derek. You need to leave." "I'm not in the way." "You will be. Let me help." She paused, just for a second. Then she said, "You want to help? Go to the supply closet, second door on the left. Get me another IV kit and 2 packs of gauze." Derek moved before she finished the sentence. He found the closet, grabbed what she asked for, brought it back. Mara took it without looking at him, her focus entirely on the patient. The next 20 minutes were a blur. Mara worked with 2 other nurses, stabilizing the guy's vitals, stopping the bleeding, prepping him for surgery. Derek stayed out of the way, watching, learning. This was what she did. This was who she was. Not a mystery, not a challenge, just someone trying to save lives in a world that kept breaking people. When the patient was finally stable and wheeled away to surgery, Mara stripped off her gloves and turned to face Derek. "Why are you here?" she asked. Derek opened his mouth, closed it. All the words he'd rehearsed in the car had evaporated. "I don't know," he said finally. Mara studied him, really looked at him, taking in the bruises, the swelling, the way he was holding his ribs. "You got hurt." "Yeah." "Bad fight?" "Something like that." She crossed her arms. "Marcus told me." "Me." "Came to my apartment." "I know, I sent him." Derek blinked. "Why?" Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Because I know what it looks like when someone's about to break. And I didn't want that on my conscience." The words hit Derek harder than any punch. "I'm not—" "Yes, you are." She stepped closer. "You've been coming here for weeks, looking for something you can't name, picking fights, pushing boundaries. And now you're standing in my ER with a face that looks like ground beef, asking me why I care." Her eyes didn't waver. "So I'm asking you, Derek, why are you really here?" Derek felt something crack open inside him. All the anger, all the frustration, all the desperate need to prove himself. It came pouring out in a rush. "Because I don't know who I am without the fight," he said. "Because I've spent my whole life being angry, and I don't know how to stop. Because you're the first person who ever looked at me and didn't see what I wanted you to see. And that terrifies me." He took a shaky breath. "Because I think you know something I don't, and I need to know it too." Mara's expression softened, just barely. "What do you think I know?" "How to be strong without needing everyone to see it." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You want to know what I learned in the military?" Derek nodded. "That strength isn't about how much you can take. It's about what you do after you break." She looked past him, at something Derek couldn't see. Everyone breaks eventually. The question is whether you let it destroy you or whether you use it to build something better. Derek felt his throat tighten. How do you know which one you are? You don't. Not until you try. She turned to walk away, but Derek caught her arm. Wait. Mara stopped, looked down at his hand on her sleeve. Derek let go immediately. I'm sorry, he said, for everything, for showing up, for pushing, for being... He stopped, started again. I'm sorry. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, apology accepted. She started to leave again, but this time Derek didn't stop her. Just watched as she walked back to the nurse's station, picked up another chart, moved on to the next patient. Derek stood there in the empty hallway, ribs aching, face throbbing, and felt something shift inside him. He didn't know what came next. Didn't know if Mara would ever see him as anything other than a problem she'd solved. But for the first time in weeks, he wasn't angry. He was just tired. And maybe that was a start. Derek turned to leave. Made it 3 steps before he heard the alarm. It was loud, piercing, urgent, the kind of sound that meant something had gone very wrong. He spun around, saw nurses running, saw Mara sprinting toward one of the bays, face tight with focus. And then he saw the man with the gang tattoos standing in the doorway of Bay 3, holding a gun. The flat tone stopped. Someone was calling out instructions Derek didn't understand. Then silence. Then footsteps, slow and heavy, coming out of the trauma bay. Derek didn't look up. Didn't need to. He knew what those footsteps meant. A hand touched his shoulder. He flinched. Derek. Mara's voice, quiet, careful. He kept his head down. Don't. I need you to... I said don't. His voice cracked. Just don't. Mara sat down next to him. Not touching, just present. They sat like that for a long time, the sounds of the ER continuing around them like nothing had changed, like a kid hadn't just died 20 feet away. Finally, Derek spoke. How old was he? 22. Did he say anything before? No. He was unconscious when they brought him in. Derek's hands clenched into fists. Who did it? We don't know yet. Police are investigating. It was the same people, wasn't it? The ones who came after that other guy. Mara didn't answer, which was answer enough. Derek stood. His legs were shaking, but he stood anyway. I need to get out of here. Doctor hasn't cleared you yet. I don't care. Derek. He's dead because of me. Derek turned to face her. You get that? He wanted to be like me. Wanted to fight like me. And now he's dead because I made that life look like something worth having. Mara's expression didn't change. That's not how it works. Isn't it? I spent months telling everyone at that gym that the only thing that mattered was being the toughest guy in the room. That respect came from your fists. That weakness was... He stopped. Couldn't finish. You didn't pull the trigger, Mara said. I might as well have. Self-pity doesn't bring him back. The words were harsh, delivered without sympathy, and they hit Derek like a slap. He stared at her. What? You heard me. Mara stood. You want to blame yourself? Fine. Sit here and feel sorry for yourself while nothing changes. Or you can figure out what you're actually going to do about it. Derek's jaw tightened. What am I supposed to do? That's not my question to answer. She walked away, leaving Derek standing there with his guilt and his anger and no idea what to do with either. He left the hospital at 6 in the morning. No one tried to stop him. He walked through the parking lot as the sun came up, bruised and exhausted and hollow, and drove home in silence. Leon was still asleep on the couch, controller on his chest. Derek walked past him, went to his room, and lay down on the bed without bothering to change. Stared at the ceiling. Thought about Tyler's face the last time they'd sparred, grinning after landing a good combination, asking Derek if that was better. Yeah, man. That was solid. Derek closed his eyes, didn't sleep. Around 9, his phone started ringing. Frank. Derek ignored it. It rang again and again. On the 4th call, Derek answered. What? Frank's voice was tight. You need to get down here, now. I'm not training today. I don't care about training. There are cops here asking about Tyler. Derek sat up. What do they want? They want to know who he was hanging around with, who might have had a problem with him. Your name came up. I didn't. I know you didn't. But you need to get down here and tell them that yourself. Derek hung up, got dressed, drove to Ironclad Gym with his head pounding and his ribs screaming and the certainty that everything was about to get worse. The gym was closed when he arrived, front door locked, but he could see people inside through the glass. Frank, 2 cops, and someone else Derek didn't recognize, a man in plain clothes with the kind of stillness that marked him as federal. Derek knocked. Frank let him in. The cops turned to look at him. One of them, a detective in his 40s with a coffee stain on his tie, stepped forward. Derek Ramsey? Yeah. I'm Detective Bronson. This is Agent Miller. He gestured to the man in plain clothes. We need to ask you some questions about Tyler Kensington. Derek's stomach dropped. I already told the hospital everything I know. This isn't about last night. This is about the 3 weeks before. Derek glanced at Frank, who looked grim. What about them? Bronson pulled out a notebook. According to phone records, Tyler called you 17 times in the last month. You only answered twice. Care to explain why? He was a kid at the gym. He called a lot. I didn't always pick up. What did you talk about when you did? Training, technique, the usual. Did he ever mention getting involved in anything outside the gym? Derek frowned. Like what? Agent Miller spoke for the first time. His voice was flat, bureaucratic. Like running packages for a distribution network operating out of 3 gyms in Silver Pine, including this one. The words hung in the air. Derek's brain struggled to process them. What? Frank's face had gone pale. That's not... We have evidence, Miller said, that someone at this gym has been recruiting fighters to work as couriers. Low-level stuff at first, picking up cash, delivering product, but it escalates. Always does. Derek felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Tyler had $5,000 in his apartment, Bronson cut in. Cash, hidden in a shoebox. Kid worked part-time at a grocery store making $12 an hour. Where do you think that money came from? Derek didn't have an answer. Miller stepped closer. We're not here to arrest you, Mr. Ramsey. We're here to find out what you know. Because right now, Tyler Kensington is dead, and 2 other fighters from this gym are missing. And if you've got information that could help us find them before they end up the same way, now's the time to share it. Derek's mind raced. Tyler, missing fighters, distribution network. None of it made sense. He'd been training at Ironclad for 3 years and never seen anything like that. But then again, he'd been too busy thinking about himself to notice much of anything. I don't know anything, Derek said finally. Tyler called, yeah. But we just talked about fighting. I didn't know he was into... He stopped. Who else is missing? Bronson checked his notes. Jay Simmons, Marcus Cole. Derek knew both names. Jay was a lightweight who'd only been around a few months. Marcus, not the security guard Marcus, different guy, had been training longer, always quiet, kept to himself. When did they go missing? Derek asked. Jay 3 days ago. Marcus last night, right around the time Tyler was shot. Derek looked at Frank. Did you know about any of this? Frank shook his head. I run a gym, not a goddamn employment agency. If someone's using my fighters for illegal work, they did it behind my back. Miller's expression suggested he didn't entirely believe that, but he didn't push. Instead, he handed Derek a business card. If you think of anything at all, call me, day or night. Derek took the card. What happens now? Now we keep investigating, and you stay available. Bronson closed his notebook. Don't leave town. We'll be in touch. They left. The gym went quiet. Frank locked the door behind them and turned to Derek. You really didn't know? No. Are you sure? Derek met his eyes. I'm sure. Frank sighed, ran a hand over his face. This is going to kill the gym. Soon as word gets out that cops are investigating, everyone's going to assume the worst. Sponsors will bail. Students will leave. He looked around at the empty space, the ring, the bags, the weights. 30 years building this place. Gone in a week. Derek didn't know what to say. He sat down on the edge of the ring, every part of him hurting. Tyler really had $5 grand. Apparently. Where would he even... Derek stopped, thought about something. The fights. Frank looked up. What fights? The underground ones. The warehouse events. No sanctioning, no records, cash only. Derek's mind was moving fast now, pieces clicking together. I fought one 3 weeks ago. Got my ass kicked. But the payout was supposed to be big. $2,000 for the loser, $5,000 for the winner. So what if Tyler started fighting those too? What if that's where the money came from? Frank shook his head. Tyler wasn't good enough for that circuit. They'd have eaten him alive. Unless he wasn't fighting, what if he was just there, watching, helping, running errands for whoever organized them? Derek stood. You remember that guy I fought? Bryce? The one who knocked you out? Yeah, he fought like he'd done it 1,000 times, not in a gym, in the real world. What if he's connected to this? Frank's expression shifted. You're reaching. Maybe, but if I'm right, those warehouse fights might be where they recruit people. Get them used to cash under the table, get them comfortable breaking rules, then offer them more money for more work. Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Even if you're right, what are you going to do about it? Derek looked at the business card Miller had given him. I'm going to find out who's running it, and I'm going to make sure Tyler didn't die for nothing. Derek spent the rest of the day making calls. Started with people he knew from the fight circuit, trainers, promoters, guys who always seemed to know when and where the next underground event was happening. Most of them didn't answer. The ones who did hung up as soon as he mentioned Tyler's name. By evening, Derek had gotten exactly nowhere. He sat in his apartment, staring at his phone, feeling the weight of his own uselessness pressing down on him. Leon came home around 7, took one look at Derek and said, You look worse than this morning. Feel worse too. Leon grabbed a beer from the fridge. Cops came by while you were out, left a card, said to call if you heard from you. I already talked to them. They asked about Tyler. Yeah. Leon sat down across from him. This is messed up, man. I know. You think someone at the gym really was recruiting? Derek nodded. I think someone's been using fighters as runners, and I think Tyler got caught in the middle of it. Leon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You know who you should talk to? Who? That nurse, Mara. Derek frowned. Why? Because the guy who came in last night, the one with the gun, he was looking for something his friend had. And his friend got stabbed the same way Tyler got shot. What if they're connected? Derek's brain stuttered. He hadn't made that connection, hadn't even thought about it. But Leon was right. The timing, the violence, the desperation, it all lined up. You think the same people are behind both? Derek asked. I don't know, but Mara might. She was there for both of them. She might have heard something, seen something. Derek stood. I need to go back to the hospital. Now? Yeah, now. Leon didn't argue, just tossed Derek his keys. Try not to get shot this time. Derek caught them, walked out the door. Drove to Silver Pine Medical Center for what felt like the 100th time in a month. Except this time he wasn't going there to chase something he couldn't name. This time he was going there to get answers. The ER was busy when Derek arrived. He walked past the check-in desk. Patty was there, and she raised an eyebrow but didn't stop him, and headed straight for the nurse's station. Mara was there, typing something into a computer. She looked up when Derek approached, and her expression went carefully neutral. You're not supposed to be here. I need to talk to you. I'm working. It's about Tyler. Mara's hands paused on the keyboard. What about him? Derek glanced around. The station was too exposed, too many people nearby. Can we go somewhere private? She hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. She led him to a small office near the back of the ER, barely more than a closet, with a desk piled high with paperwork and a chair that looked like it had been salvaged from a dumpster. Mara closed the door. Talk, she said. Derek told her everything. The cops, the money, the missing fighters, the theory about the warehouse fights being a recruitment ground. When he finished, Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You think the man with the gun last night was part of this network? I don't know. But his friend got stabbed, Tyler got shot. 2 different weapons, same level of violence, and both of them ended up here. Mara leaned against the desk. The police asked me about that too, about whether I'd noticed any patterns in trauma admissions over the last few months. Had you? Yes. Stab wounds, gunshots, blunt force trauma, all young men, all between 18 and 25, all with similar injuries. Most of them refused to give statements. The ones who did gave fake names. Derek felt a chill run down his spine. How many? 8 in the last 3 months, including Tyler. And you reported this? Of course I did. But without cooperation from the victims, there's not much the police can do. Mara crossed her arms. What are you planning to do with this information? Find whoever's running it. Stop them before more kids end up dead. You're not a cop. I don't care. Derek, Tyler looked up to me, Derek said, and his voice came out harder than he intended. He wanted to be like me, and now he's dead because I was too selfish to notice what was happening right in front of me. So yeah, I'm going to do something about it, even if it gets me killed. Mara studied him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone, scrolled through something, and turned the screen toward him. The man from last night, his name is Vincent Shaw. The friend he was looking for, the one who got stabbed, is Marcus Holloway. Both of them have records: assault, distribution, firearms violations. Derek looked at the mugshots on the screen. Shaw he recognized from the hallway. Holloway he didn't. Where'd you get this? I have contacts. Mara pocketed her phone. Shaw's still in custody, but he's not talking. And Holloway's recovering upstairs in the ICU. Also not talking. Can I see him? No. Why not? Because he's under guard, and you're a civilian with no authority and no reason to be there. Mara's expression softened slightly. But I can. Derek blinked. You'd do that? I'd ask him a few questions while checking his vitals. If he happens to say something useful, I'll let you know. She paused. But Derek, you need to understand something. If this is what you think it is, if there's an organized network recruiting fighters, these aren't street thugs. They're professionals. And they will hurt you if you get in their way. I know. Do you? Because you've spent your whole life fighting in rings with rules and referees. This isn't that. This is people who'll put a bullet in your head and dump you in the river without thinking twice. Derek met her eyes. I know, and I'm doing it anyway. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, give me an hour. Meet me in the parking lot, north side near the employee entrance. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If Holloway doesn't talk, we're back at square one. She left. Derek stood in the tiny office, alone with the weight of what he'd just committed to, and wondered if he'd finally lost his mind. Probably. But it was too late to back out now. Derek waited in the parking lot. The hour stretched into 90 minutes. He was about to text Mara when she appeared, walking toward him with her jacket pulled tight against the cold. Well? Derek asked. Holloway's scared. Really scared. He wouldn't give names, but he did say something. Mara glanced around, making sure they were alone. He said the people running this operation don't just recruit fighters. They own them. Debts, leverage, threats, whatever it takes to keep them in line. And if someone tries to leave or talk to the cops, they make an example. Like Tyler. Like Tyler. Mara pulled out her phone again, showed him a photo she'd taken. A piece of paper with an address scrawled on it. This is where Holloway was supposed to make a drop the night he got stabbed. He said if I wanted to know who was running things, I should check there. But Derek, I'm going. It's dangerous. I don't care. Mara's jaw tightened. Then I'm coming with you. Derek stared. What? No, you're not. You need someone who knows how to handle themselves in a hostile situation, someone who's trained for it. Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact. That's me, not you. Mara, you could lose your job. You could get killed. So could you. At least if I'm there, the odds improve. She looked at him steadily. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you how this is going to go. Derek wanted to argue, wanted to tell her to stay safe, stay out of it, but he knew that look. Knew she'd already made up her mind. All right, he said. When? Tonight, late, when there's less chance of running into anyone. Mara checked her watch. My shift ends at 11. Meet me here at midnight. What do I bring? Nothing, no weapons, no phone, nothing that can be traced back to you. We go in, we look around, we get out. That's it. Derek nodded. Midnight. Mara walked away. Derek stood in the parking lot watching her go and felt the enormity of what he'd just agreed to settle over him like a weight. He went home, tried to eat, couldn't. Tried to sleep, couldn't do that either. Leon was out somewhere, which was probably for the best. Derek didn't want to explain what he was about to do. At 11:30, he got in his car and drove back to Silver Pine Medical Center. Mara was waiting in the north parking lot, dressed in dark jeans and a black jacket, hair pulled back, no jewelry. She looked different out of scrubs. Harder. More like the person in that old photo. She got in the passenger seat. You ready? No? Good. Means you're thinking clearly. She handed him a slip of paper with the address. It's in the industrial district. Lots of warehouses, not much foot traffic this time of night. We park a block away and walk in. Derek started the car. They drove in silence, through empty streets and shuttered storefronts, until they reached the industrial district, a maze of concrete and chain link and buildings that looked like they'd been abandoned decades ago. Derek found the address. It was a warehouse at the end of a dead-end street, rusted metal siding and broken windows. No lights, no signs of life. He parked a block away, killed the engine. They sat in the dark, listening to the silence. You sure about this? Derek asked. Mara looked at him. No, but I'm doing it anyway. They got out, walked toward the warehouse. The street was empty, the only sound their footsteps on cracked pavement. As they got closer, Derek saw something that made his stomach drop. The front door was open, just slightly, like someone had left in a hurry and didn't bother to close it. Mara saw it too. She held up a hand, signaling Derek to stop. They stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing. Mara moved forward, pushing the door open wider. Inside was darkness. She pulled out a small flashlight, the kind nurses carried for checking pupils, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating a vast empty space. Concrete floor, metal beams, and in the center, stacks of wooden crates. Derek followed her inside. The air smelled like dust and oil and something else. Something metallic. Blood. Mara's flashlight found it first. A dark stain on the floor, still wet, spreading out from behind one of the crates. She moved closer. Derek's heart hammered. Behind the crate was a body. Derek recognized him instantly. Jay Simmons. One of the missing fighters. He'd been shot twice. Once in the chest, once in the head. His eyes were still open. Derek turned away, bile rising in his throat. Mara crouched next to the body, checking for a pulse, even though they both knew there wouldn't be one. He's been dead less than an hour, she said quietly. Body's still warm. Derek forced himself to look. Where's Marcus Cole? I don't know. But if Jay's here... She stopped. Stood. We need to leave. Now. But before they could move, lights flooded the warehouse, bright, blinding, coming from every direction. And a voice, calm, familiar, said, I was wondering when you'd show up. Derek's blood turned to ice. The light shifted and he saw who was speaking. It was Frank, his coach, standing 20 feet away with 3 other men, all of them armed. Derek's world narrowed to a pinpoint. Frank, the man who'd trained him for 3 years, the man who'd talked about discipline and purpose and knowing why you were in the ring, the man holding a gun. Frank! Derek's voice came out hoarse. What is this? Frank smiled, but it wasn't the expression Derek knew. This one was colder, calculated. This is business, Derek. Nothing personal. You killed Jay. Jay made a choice. Wrong one, unfortunately. He tried to run. Tell the cops about our arrangement. Frank gestured with the gun toward the body. Had to make sure that didn't happen. Mara's hand found Derek's arm, squeezed once, a warning. Stay calm. Don't move. Derek couldn't stop staring at Frank. Tyler, too? Tyler got greedy, wanted a bigger cut, threatened to expose the operation if I didn't pay him. Frank shrugged. Can't have that. Sets a bad precedent. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing business expenses instead of murder, made Derek's vision go red. He was a kid. He was a liability. Derek took a step forward. One of Frank's men raised his weapon. Derek froze. Easy, Frank said. Let's keep this civilized. You two came here looking for answers. Well, Here they are. I've been running product through Ironclad for 5 years. Started small, cash drops, simple deliveries. But the fight game? That's where the real money is. Young guys desperate to prove themselves, willing to do anything for respect and a paycheck. Perfect recruitment pool. You used us, Derek said. I gave you opportunity. Most of you would have ended up nowhere. At least this way you got paid. Most of us ended up dead. Frank's expression didn't change. Occupational hazard. You know how the world works, Derek. Strongest survive. Weak get eliminated. I taught you that. You taught me to fight, not to be a murderer. What's the difference? You step into a ring, you're trying to hurt someone, break them, make them submit. I just took that concept and applied it to a bigger arena. Frank gestured around the warehouse. This is the real world. No referees, no rules, just winners and losers. Mara spoke for the first time, her voice eerily calm. How many kids have you gotten killed? Frank looked at her, really looked, and Derek saw recognition flicker across his face. I know you, the nurse, the one who wouldn't leave well enough alone. Answer the question. Why? What are you going to do about it? You're standing in a warehouse with a dead body and 3 armed men who'd be happy to add 2 more. Frank tilted his head. Although I have to admit, I'm curious. Why would a civilian nurse risk her life for this? What's in it for you? Mara's expression didn't change. Justice, Frank laughed. Justice, that's cute. Let me tell you about justice. I spent 30 years building that gym, pouring every dollar I had into it, training fighters who went on to make millions while I scraped by on membership fees. You want to talk about justice? There isn't any. There's just people who take what they can and people who get taken from. Is that what you told yourself when you shot Tyler? Derek asked. Frank's smile faded. I didn't shoot him. One of my people did. I was at the gym all night. Alibis airtight. But you gave the order. I made a business decision. Derek's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to attack, to make Frank hurt the way Tyler had hurt, the way Jay was hurting right now, lying dead on cold concrete. But Mara's hand was still on his arm, holding him back. And then Derek noticed something. Mara wasn't just holding his arm, she was tapping it. 3 short taps. A pause. 3 more. A signal. Derek forced himself to stay focused on Frank. What happens now? Now? You two disappear. Bodies get dumped somewhere they won't be found for months. Investigation goes cold. Life goes on. Frank checked his watch. We've got a shipment coming in 30 minutes, so we need to wrap this up. Police know we're here, Mara said. Frank raised an eyebrow. Do they? I called Detective Bronson before we left. Told him where we were going. You're lying. Am I? Mara's voice stayed steady. Check your phone. I'm betting you've got missed calls. Frank hesitated, pulled out his phone. His expression flickered, just for a second, and Derek knew Mara had been bluffing. There were no calls. But that second of doubt was all they needed. Mara moved. She was fast, faster than Derek had ever seen anyone move, grabbing the flashlight from her pocket and hurling it at the nearest gunman's face. It connected with a crack. The man stumbled back, gun swinging wild. Mara was already moving, closing the distance to the second gunman, driving her elbow into his throat before he could raise his weapon. He went down gagging. Derek didn't think, just reacted, launched himself at Frank. Frank tried to bring the gun up. Derek grabbed his wrist, twisted, heard something pop. Frank screamed. The gun clattered to the floor. Derek drove his knee into Frank's gut, followed it with a punch that split his lip. Frank went down. The third gunman fired. The shot was deafening, echoing off metal walls. Derek felt something hot graze his shoulder, not a direct hit, but close enough to send him stumbling. Mara was on the third gunman before he could fire again. She grabbed his arm, used his own momentum to slam him into a support beam. His head bounced off metal with a hollow thunk. He dropped. Silence. Heavy breathing. The smell of gunpowder. Derek looked around. All 3 of Frank's men were down. Frank was on his knees, cradling his broken wrist, blood dripping from his mouth. Mara picked up one of the dropped guns, checked it, pointed it at Frank. Don't move. Frank looked up at her. For the first time, Derek saw real fear in his eyes. You won't shoot me. You sure about that? You're a nurse. You save lives. I was a soldier first. Mara's finger rested on the trigger guard. Not threatening, just ready. And I've put down worse than you. Frank's face went pale. Derek's shoulder was bleeding, but the wound was superficial. He grabbed his phone, the one he'd left in the car, the one Mara had told him not to bring. She'd been testing him. He'd failed, but she'd planned for that. He dialed 911. This is Derek Ramsey. I'm at 1247 Industrial Drive. There's been a shooting. Multiple suspects down. Send police and ambulances. And tell Detective Bronson that Frank Morrison is the one running the distribution network. We've got evidence. The operator's voice was distant, asking questions Derek didn't process. He hung up. Mara was still holding the gun on Frank. Tyler Kensington, 22 years old. Wanted to be a professional fighter. You took that from him. I gave him money. You gave him a bullet. Mara's voice went cold. Jay Simmons, Marcus Cole. How many others? Frank didn't answer. How many? 11, Frank said finally. Over 5 years. 11 kids who couldn't keep their mouths shut. Derek felt sick. 11, not just Tyler and Jay. 11 young men who'd walked into Ironclad looking for discipline and purpose and found death instead. Why? Derek asked. Frank looked at him. Because I could. Because they were expendable. Because in this world, you're either the hammer or the nail, and I decided a long time ago which one I was going to be. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Mara lowered the gun slightly. It's over. Frank laughed, a broken, bitter sound. You think this ends with me? You think I'm the only one? There are 3 other gyms in this city running the same operation. Take down one, 2 more pop up. That's how it works. Then we'll take down those 2, Mara said. You're one nurse and one washed-up fighter. You're nothing. Derek stepped forward. Maybe. But we're the ones still standing. The sirens were loud now, red and blue lights flashing through the broken windows. Frank tried to stand. Mara raised the gun again. He stayed down. The warehouse door crashed open. Cops flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Mara set the gun down carefully, raised her hands. Derek did the same. Derek Ramsey, he called out. I'm the one who called. The suspects are secured. Detective Bronson pushed through, took in the scene, the body, the downed gunman, Frank on his knees, and his expression hardened. Cuffed them, all of them. Morrison's the one you want, Mara said. He's been running a distribution network through his gym, recruiting fighters, using them as couriers. When they tried to leave or talk, he had them killed. Bronson looked at Frank. That true? Frank didn't answer. An officer pulled him to his feet, cuffed him, read him his rights. Frank stared at Derek the whole time, and Derek stared back, refusing to look away. Agent Miller appeared, surveyed the warehouse, and started giving orders. Crime scene techs moved in. More cops. Paramedics. One of them approached Derek, saw his shoulder. You're bleeding. It's nothing. Let me check anyway. Derek let himself be led to an ambulance parked outside. They cleaned the wound, a graze just like he'd thought, and bandaged it. Told him he was lucky. He didn't feel lucky. He felt hollow. Mara was giving her statement to Bronson, calm and detailed, walking him through everything. When she finished, Bronson shook his head. You 2 are either the bravest people I've ever met or the dumbest. Probably both, Mara said. Bronson almost smiled. We'll need you to come down to the station. Full statements. This is going to take a while. I understand. Derek and Mara ended up in the back of separate patrol cars. Not arrested, just transported. Protocol. Derek watched through the window as Frank was loaded into another car, head down, hands cuffed behind his back. 30 years building a gym, 5 years destroying lives. It was over in one night. The station was chaos. Detectives, federal agents, cops from multiple jurisdictions all trying to coordinate. Derek and Mara were separated, placed in different interview rooms. Derek spent 3 hours going through everything. The warehouse fights, Tyler's calls, the missing fighters, the confrontation. When they finally let him go, it was 4 a.m. Mara was waiting in the lobby, looking exhausted but unbroken. You okay? Derek asked. I've had worse nights. They walked out into the parking lot. The sky was starting to lighten, that gray pre-dawn glow that made everything look washed out and unreal. What happens now? Derek asked. Now they build a case. Frank's looking at 11 murder charges. Conspiracy, distribution, racketeering. He's not getting out. Mara leaned against Derek's car. The other gyms he mentioned, those'll take time, but Miller's already putting together task forces. And us? We go home. Try to sleep. Tomorrow we wake up and figure out what's left. Derek thought about Ironclad, about all the hours he'd spent there, thinking it was building him into something better. I don't know if I can go back there. So don't. Find somewhere else. Start over. Mara looked at him. You're good at fighting, Derek, but maybe it's time to figure out what you're fighting for. The words echoed what Frank had said, what everyone had said. But coming from Mara, they didn't sound like criticism. They sounded like possibility. What about you? Derek asked. You just took down a criminal operation. Pretty sure that's above and beyond for a nurse. Mara smiled slightly. I told you. I'm good at handling hostile situations. You were special forces, weren't you? She didn't answer directly, just said, I was a lot of things. Now I'm trying to be something else. Is it working? Some days. She pushed off the car. I should go. Shift starts in 6 hours. You're going back to work? Someone has to. She started to walk away, then paused. Derek? What you did tonight, standing up to Frank, helping me take them down, that took guts. Real guts. Not the kind you get in a ring. I was terrified. Good. Means you understood the stakes. She met his eyes. You're going to be okay. It'll take time, but you'll get there. Derek wanted to say something. Thank you. I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing, but the words stuck in his throat. Mara seemed to understand. She nodded once, then walked to her car and drove away. Derek stood in the parking lot alone, watching the sky brighten, and felt something shift inside him. Not closure, not peace, just the raw, uncomfortable awareness that he'd been living his entire life for the wrong reasons, and now he had to figure out the right ones. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Frank's arrest made headlines. The investigation expanded, pulling in the other gyms, uncovering a network bigger than anyone had realized. 17 arrests total, charges ranging from drug trafficking to murder. Ironclad Gym closed permanently. The building sat empty, windows dark, a for lease sign hammered into the dirt out front. Derek drove past it once, then never went back. Tyler's funeral was on a Thursday. Small service, just family and a few people from the gym. Derek sat in the back, hands clenched in his lap, and listened to Tyler's mother talk about the son she'd lost. She didn't mention the money or the network or any of it, just talked about a kid who'd loved fighting and wanted to make something of himself. When it was over, Derek approached her. Mrs. Kensington, I'm Derek. I trained with Tyler. She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. He talked about you, said you were the best fighter at the gym. Derek's throat tightened. He was getting better. He had real potential. The police said you helped catch the man who... She stopped. Couldn't finish. I did what I could. It wasn't enough. It was something. She touched his arm. Thank you. Derek left the funeral feeling worse than when he'd arrived. Gratitude felt wrong. He didn't deserve it, but he carried it anyway. 3 weeks after the warehouse, Derek got a call from Agent Miller. We've been reviewing evidence, Miller said, going through Frank Morrison's records. Turns out he kept detailed logs. Names, dates, payments, everything we need to dismantle the entire network. That's good. It is. But there's something else. We found references to another operation, bigger than the gym network. Morrison was just a mid-level player. There are people above him. Derek's stomach sank. How far up does it go? We don't know yet, but we're going to find out. Miller paused. I wanted to thank you. What you did, putting yourself in danger to get answers, that gave us the break we needed. I didn't do it for you. I know, but it matters anyway. Miller hung up. Derek sat in his apartment staring at nothing and thought about Mara's words. Figure out what you're fighting for. He pulled out his phone, opened a blank note, started typing. Things I'm good at. Fighting. Taking hits. Getting back up. Things I'm not good at. knowing when to stop, seeing past myself, protecting people who needed it. He stared at the list, added one more line. Things I want to be good at, all of the above. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Derek found work at a community center on the east side of Silverpine, not training fighters, he couldn't stomach that yet, but teaching basic self-defense to kids who needed it. Teenagers from rough neighborhoods, kids who'd seen violence and wanted to learn how to protect themselves without becoming part of the cycle. It was harder than fighting had ever been. These kids didn't care about technique or discipline. They just wanted to feel safe. And Derek had to figure out how to give them that without teaching them to hurt people. He learned. Slowly. Made mistakes. Had a kid quit after 2 weeks because Derek pushed too hard. Had another thank him for teaching her how to stand her ground against her ex. Small victories. Small failures. The kind of thing that didn't make headlines but mattered anyway. One afternoon, 6 weeks after the warehouse, Mara showed up at the community center. Derek was in the middle of a class, teaching a group of 15-year-olds how to break a grab without throwing a punch. He saw her standing in the doorway and almost lost his train of thought. When the class ended, she approached. "You're teaching." "Trying to." "How's it going?" "Some days better than others." Derek wiped sweat from his face. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you were working with kids, wanted to see it for myself." Mara glanced at the students filtering out, laughing and talking. "They look happy. They're learning. That's something." Mara smiled. "It's more than something." They walked outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Derek sat on a bench near the entrance. Mara sat next to him. "Frank's trial starts next month," she said. "I know. Bronson called. Said they want me to testify." "You going to?" "Yeah, I owe Tyler that much." Mara nodded. "The other gyms, they've all been shut down. Networks dismantled. Miller's team is still chasing the bigger players, but the street-level operation is done." "Does it feel like enough?" "No, but it's what we've got." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Derek said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about figuring out what I'm fighting for. And I think I'm starting to get it. It's not about being the toughest guy in the room. It's not about proving I'm better than everyone else." He looked at her. "It's about using what I'm good at to help people who can't help themselves." Mara's expression softened. "That's a good answer." "You think I can do it?" "I think you're already doing it." Derek felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief, not pride. Just the quiet certainty that he was on the right path, even if he didn't know where it led. "What about you?" he asked. "Still saving lives?" "Every shift. It's what I do." Mara stood. "But I'm also teaching trauma response classes at the hospital, showing other nurses how to handle high-stress situations without falling apart, passing on what you learned." Something like that. Derek stood too. "Thank you for everything. For calling me out when I was being an idiot. For risking your life to help me take down Frank. For—" He stopped. "Just thank you." Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You know what I see when I look at you now?" "What?" "Someone who's not afraid to be broken. Someone who's willing to rebuild even when it hurts." She smiled. "That's rare. Don't lose it." She walked to her car. Derek watched her drive away, the same way he'd watched her leave the hospital parking lot weeks ago. But this time felt different. This time felt like closure. Not the end, just a turning point. What? 6 months later, Derek was running 3 classes a week at the community center. He'd been approached by 2 other centers, asking if he'd be willing to expand. He'd said yes. He'd also reconnected with Leon, who'd started training at a legitimate gym across town and was doing well. They met for beers once a week, talked about fights and life, and how weird it was that everything had changed so fast. Frank Morrison was convicted on all charges. Life sentence, no parole. Derek had testified, standing in front of a courtroom and describing what Frank had done, what he'd built, what he'd destroyed. It had been one of the hardest things Derek had ever done, but he'd done it. The community center hosted a fundraiser in Tyler's name. They raised enough to start a scholarship fund for kids who wanted to learn self-defense but couldn't afford it. Derek spoke at the event, talked about Tyler's potential, about the lives cut short by violence, about the responsibility they all had to do better. When he finished, Tyler's mother hugged him, told him Tyler would have been proud. Derek hoped she was right. One evening, after a particularly brutal class where he'd had to break up a fight between two students, Derek sat alone in the empty gym and thought about the person he'd been a year ago. The guy who'd walked into Silver Pine Medical Center with a busted hand and an ego bigger than his talent. The guy who'd thought respect came from fists and fear. That guy was gone, dead and buried under the weight of everything that had happened since. And in his place was someone Derek was still getting to know. Someone who showed up even when it was hard. Someone who taught instead of just fighting. Someone who understood that strength wasn't about dominance, it was about endurance. Derek's phone buzzed, a text from Mara. Saw the article about the scholarship fund. Well done. He smiled, typed back. Couldn't have done it without you. Her response came fast. Yes, you could have. You just needed to believe it. Derek put his phone away, locked up the community center, walked to his car under a sky full of stars. The world hadn't changed. Violence still existed. Networks still operated. Kids still got caught in cycles they didn't understand. But Derek had changed, and maybe that was enough. He drove home thinking about Tyler, about Jay and Marcus, and all the others who hadn't gotten a second chance. About the kids he was teaching now, the ones who still had time to choose a different path. And he thought about Mara's words from that first night in the ER, the ones that had cut deeper than any punch, the kind where you don't get to walk away if you lose. Derek had fought that kind of fight, had stared down death and walked away changed, had lost pieces of himself and rebuilt with the fragments that remained. He'd been broken, he'd been rebuilt. And now he was passing that lesson forward, one student at a time. The road ahead was long, the work was hard, but for the first time in his life, Derek Ramsey knew exactly why he was fighting, and that made all the difference.